This podcast is brought to you by the OBSBot Tiny SE high refresh rate 1080p webcam. Get 5% off at Amazon or their official website through the links in the description. And then it is also brought to you by CDkeyoffer.com. Use offer code BrokenSilicon to save 25% on all Microsoft software. We'll talk about these sponsors more later, but for now, let's get on with the show. Welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Holy Moly Tom. I'm joined today by co-host
Easter Dan. We'll just keep it simple.
Well, see, this is the two things going on today. We're probably going to have to make this one a little shorter than usual, though it's not abnormal for us to only go for like an hour 20, an hour 30, which I assume is what we'll about do. And it should be easier because usually we record at 6 or 8 p.m. And I have to admit, I've heard this on other podcasts too. The earlier in the day we record, we're recording very early afternoon instead of in the evening. The quicker we are to get through the information.
Sure. That makes sense.
And I don't think it's just like you're sharper so you speak quicker or have more energy. I do think there's just less talking off subject the less tired you are.
Oh, yeah, sure. And I don't know. We've got a bit of I don't know if you have a time crunch today, a bit of one, I guess, but
it depends who you ask. My girlfriend would say we definitely do have a time crunch.
Sure.
Because we have to go to her family's Easter thing. Of course, Dan, you can see, is in the room he was in for a while, a year ago.
Yeah, something like that.
When he was staying with me in Nashville. So Dan and my family is in Nashville. Of course, our parents are not to be seen, but they are on the premises.
Their presence is felt.
Their presence is felt, much like the Lord Jesus on Easter. All right, everybody. Let us just jump into it. I don't have any opening reader mails here, but
perfect
we
again.
And no corrections because we're never wrong, man. But no, of course, we are often wrong, and you can submit corrections on the Moore's Law Said Discord. We just did not get any this news cycle. But yeah, let's get to the first story here, which, I mean, you could say is a corrections of sorts, just tons of reviewers trying to correct Nvidia with story number one. RTX 5060 Ti reviewed and launched. So I'm going to quote a few reviews here, or a couple reviews, and then get into the editorialization. First from Linus Tech Tips, which I highly recommend. I thought their basically refusal to do a review is an excellent video. Linus said, Nvidia, you're acting like that chick that used to be hot, and she thinks she's still hot and thinks I'm going to drop everything when she comes calling. But I'm married with 3 kids now, and not only do I love my wife, but if we're being honest, you peaked in high school anyway. I'm not playing your games anymore, and honestly, that's a hard thing for me to say. I want to have positive things to say about graphics cards. I just don't for this review. Also, I don't believe he could get through that bit they did without laughing because of how silly it sounded. Now from Get Guru. Personally, I think there is a mixed bag that really sums up this card, the 5060 Ti. Let's start with the negative points. It is just a 31% gain over not the 4060 Ti, but the 3060 Ti for rasterization, which really seems like quite underwhelming of a result considering that GPU launched at the end of 2020. I think we'd all hope for further progress in 5 years. In the context of today's market, though, it is delivering 15% gains over its predecessor, the 4060 Ti 16GB, at a lower price, and that actually sounds not that bad compared to just how horribly bad other Blackwell GPUs are. I mean, consider that the 5070 was just 1 to 5% of the 4070 Super. And so there you go. At the end of the day, the 5060 Ti 16GB seems to offer decent performance and a decent price at MSRP. But the way Nvidia has handled this launch is a cause for tons of legit criticism. Namely, they are refusing to provide 8GB GPUs for testing, almost certainly in order to hide the horrible performance issues. In fact, the biggest performance surprise in a positive light is how close the 5060 Ti 16GB got to the 5070 in ray tracing, especially in hardware and box testing, focusing on newer and more demanding titles. But really, this just illustrates NVIDIA's continued folly of a 70 class card with 12 gigabytes with a 60 Ti's get 16 for some of their models. It also implies what we can expect for ray tracing performance, namely horrible ray tracing performance for the 8 gigabyte model. And meanwhile, American and American-centric reviewers, we must note, decried the lack of supply for the 5060 Ti's launch. However, it must be noted that the situation is quite a bit different in the European Union, where we see plentiful stock even in second and third tier markets like some Eastern European countries. This fits what we have reported on Moore's Law said weeks ago by our sources in the supply chain. We were told that new launches would start to focus on Europe, while the US gets cheaper to make, yet still overpriced for their quality basic models to try to cope with tariff surcharges. We also discussed how tariff uncertainty will result in hesitance or the real inability for companies to ship goods into the US at all until the many confusions and uncertainties clear up a bit. Although finally, the real big surprise for this launch is that it seems gamers are also, even in Europe where there's plentiful supply, rejecting Nvidia's pricing wholesale. The European Union might have had a decent launch, but you know what? They're still sitting there and no one's buying them up despite shortages. People do not want Nvidia's crap anymore. And so the way I would summarize that quite long write-up is, and we did a whole die shrink talking about both the 5060 Ti and what's going on with Nvidia's mindshare, but just $2 a month, just $2 actually, just gets you access to that in hundreds of die shrinks. So just, consider supporting us on Patreon for that. But we talk about that in great detail, like what's happening to the mindshare. And there's a section where we say, well, the 5060 Ti in a vacuum isn't really the worst card. Maybe it shouldn't be the 5060 Ti. Maybe it should be the 5060. Maybe it should just have 12 gigabytes at a lower price. But really a near $400 card converted in European Union, maybe not in the US right now, with 16 gigabytes for that level of performance isn't that bad. But the problem is,
well, there's no Founders Edition. I mean, that's a pretty big.
But the problem is the way Nvidia is hiding the 8 gigabyte card for this launch, I think, earns it a bad review anyways. And so reviewers hated how Nvidia is handling this. People are tired of Nvidia's nonsense. There is supply in Europe, but people don't want it. Yeah, Dan, let me stop rambling. What do you think?
I mean, like you said, at what the purported MSRP of $430, it's fine, but the problem is there's not really an attempt by Nvidia, even like day one, to supply anything at MSRP.
Not in the United States. In Europe, they are, though.
Yeah, but
again, we're Americans, but we do have to think globally.
Yeah, I know, but there's not much anchoring it to that MSRP without a Founders model. There's no 8 gigabyte models out there, so nothing's really anchoring it to that $430 MSRP. So a lot of these cards, their reported MSRP is closer to like the day one reviews that we saw were at like $500 MSRP models. So in a lot of ways, from my perspective, we're getting a 7800 XT with a few extra bells and whistles a year and a half later for about the same price. And at $400 or $430, I think the 5060 Ti is fine. That's a decent progression in price performance versus what we had last generation. But I don't know, it's just not there. The models that they say exist don't really exist in any market, and at least in the US, the supply is terrible, which I don't think you can lay completely at the hands of Nvidia. There's some extenuating circumstances, I would say, but okay. I mean, fine GPU, bad launch, I would say.
Yeah. Again, if it had 12 gigabytes, was called the 5060 for like 380, even 350.
That would be nice, yeah.
And it's like, okay, it's not, I wouldn't give Nvidia a glowing review, but I'd be like, it's more, but boy, is it stronger than the 4060, and it actually has 12 gigabytes, whatever. But instead, again, we have really a card that just points out how much Nvidia sucks right now. It has 16 gigabytes. In the EU, maybe you can get it for a good price. In the US, you can't. And it just kind of makes the 5070 look worse because it already is in some scenarios performing close to a 5070 because it actually has enough RAM, unlike the 5070. But then you look at that and you're like, well, maybe I should just skip Blackwell altogether. And I really think that is the major story for the 5060 Ti is even in markets where it is available at MSRP, people aren't flocking to Nvidia. The 5070 is coming in stock at MSRP in the US every now and then, below MSRP in the EU. For me, it's just the death of Nvidia's mindshare. Again, we did a whole die shrink about this, and I don't want to relitigate all of it, for those who've already listened to it on the Patreon. But I really do have to say that, again, I'm a contrarian, so I love having fun little opinions and seeing if they play out. But I just, there's a part of me that goes, I think these people in the comments that say Nvidia, people just flock back to Nvidia when stuff is in stock. They're not in Europe. And Nvidia's more popular in Europe, relatively speaking, to the US versus Radeon. And I don't know. I think people are severely underestimating how much damage to Nvidia's mind share they have done over the past 3 generations. And it just seems like Blackwell, where everything's gone wrong at once, is the culmination of that.
Yeah, it really is. Just Blackwell overall has deficiencies that aren't typical of Nvidia, and I wonder if that's just catalyzing the collapse of their mind share with at least this generation. I'm curious if it is a one-off and if they recover with the next generation, if people care or people are just turned off from Nvidia right now. Because Blackwell, I mean, you have the issues with drivers, you have the issues with ROPs, you have these amateurish issues, and they're just not really delivering that much of a generational uplift. Ironically, except with the 5060 Ti, which is probably, relatively speaking, one of the better cards this generation from Nvidia. But it really does just seem like, people don't want them.
Yeah. I don't know. Let me see here. Elevite writes in and says, did Nvidia hire the former Radeon PR team for Blackwell? I think they may have hired the RDNA 1 driver team.
I don't think they have the same issues that Radeon had, where they just had dubious claims everywhere that people were like, I don't know if I trust these.
Yeah, it's not like they have the same issues of Radeon, although you could point to RDNA 3, of course, having those ridiculous claims for the performance of Navi 31. But even that wasn't really Nvidia scale. They were off 20%. Nvidia is usually off by a factor. What did they claim? Didn't they claim the 5060 Ti is 50 times faster than the 4060 Ti in some insane scenario?
Which were they? I can't remember anymore. Was the 5060 Ti supposed to be the one that gave us 4090 performance?
No.
Or was that the 5070? That was the 5070. Okay, so.
But believe that there's a new claim out there right now that they're saying it's 50 times faster than the 3060 Ti or 4060 Ti. So again,
well, that's good.
Nvidia for RDNA 3 claiming 70% instead of 40% is still not Nvidia's tier. But no, I actually don't think, they hired the Radeon PR team and maybe the RDNA 1 driver team. I just think that Nvidia's PR team has cried wolf one too many times. And you see this, it's like, I've asked people at AMD, when I leak the IPC for Zen 5 being at least 15% or higher, or I think I said 16% or higher was the final thing. And then it was whatever they said, it was 16 or 17%. I don't even remember off the top of my head. But I remember AMD engineers going, yeah, I think that you could fairly claim 15 or something, but maybe they'll try 20. I hope they don't, because I don't think most people will see it as a 20% IPC increase. This happens all the time when I talk to people at Intel or AMD or Nvidia, where they're like, well, this is where the performance is. I don't know what marketing will claim. And I wonder if there's going to be massive pushback next generation from engineering that will actually be listened to at Nvidia. Like we've been telling you for 3 generations, not to say this 2 to 4x crap. Now no one even believes us when we're not lying. And so we can't even market. You guys have realized you've created a situation where you can't even market Nvidia graphics cards anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I made jokes about this, I think, starting with Ampere. Their claims are so outlandish that they don't even feel dishonest at a certain point. You just kind of see them and laugh, and you're like, okay, Nvidia, cool. We're getting over the course of 2 to 3 generations, a 10x uplift in performance according to their charts if you do the multiplication. And everybody knows it's dishonest, but at a certain point that does bite you in the ass, where I don't even know why you would pay attention to their marketing anymore. It's completely decoupled from reality at this point, so why not just wait for reviews?
Well, it has at least created a whole cottage industry for people like me and Hardware Unboxed and Gamers Nexus to read through the data and find the
You
two things where we can go, oh, I found it. There's the real performance. So it does
you
allow
be,
us to make videos. So selfishly, I don't mind it that much.
yeah, you've become a Jensen Wang oracle.
Yes, like it allows us to profit, I suppose, off of their lies by finding a way to tell you all the truth. But outside of that, I think it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
This piece of content is brought to you by the OBSBot Tiny SE. The Tiny SE supports an unprecedented 1080p at 100 frames per second or 720p at 150 frames per second, outperforming the overwhelming majority of affordable small webcams on the market. You can enjoy crystal clear and ultra smooth video that captures every nuance in motion effortlessly. And it is not just about the frame rate, by the way. It's a breakthrough and cost-effective low light performance too, with a 1 and 2.8 inch stacked CMOS, dual native ISO, staggered HDR, and 12-bit dynamic color range in order to ensure excellent video quality in any lighting conditions. Additionally, the Tiny SE goes beyond basic AI by including more advanced functions like zone tracking and body part tracking as well. And you know what? I'm using one right now. Genuinely, we at Moore's Law is Dead, me and Dan, the co-host of Broken Silicon, use OBSBot cameras because we have concluded they are just the best use for what we want out of a camera for our purposes. And so I really do recommend them. And if you want to check them out for yourself and also support the channel, follow the links in the directions below. Again, support Moore's Law is Dead by checking out the OBSBot Tiny SE through the links below today. The Forbidden Juice writes in, speaking of Gamers Nexus, it says, just saw Gamers Nexus video on NVIDIA driver woes. It's a quite damning for Steve to say that they are trying their best to be like Intel alchemists at launch. I have to say, you must feel vindicated now, having said for the past years, hey guys, NVIDIA has made bad drivers before. I always did believe that to be the case, and this launch just proves it. Looks like NVIDIA not only phoned in their hardware, but their software as well. Yeah, and I've seen Carbon Cry, who's part of the Moore's Law is Dead team, pointing that out to me as well, that we should highlight this, that since the start of Moore's Law is Dead, when people are like, AMD's drivers are bad, I've been like, no, they're not. They're fine. I mean, I even switched to AMD for like 5 years or so because our NVIDIA cards during the 500 series were just unusable with their drivers. And then AMD was great. Every now and then there's a miss. And then NVIDIA, I'd say, after Kepler, had pretty solid drivers, and then something just started to go wrong here with Blackwell really badly. But there's always blips here and there, and I've never felt like you can just say NVIDIA's drivers are more stable, except for like, again, maybe RDNA 1 through 3 to a degree, but it's a slight degree. And I don't know if I use the term vindicating, but I would remind people, NVIDIA has always had periods where they have worse drivers than AMD, sometimes far worse drivers. And this narrative being popped, I love it because now we can just focus on if the card is good, and I don't have to deal with people saying, oh, yeah, but, it won't work.
It really does feel sometimes like, if it gets repeated in forums enough, does it become the truth? Because that does seem to be the origin of the NVIDIA just has blanket more stable drivers than AMD. This is like, if I tell myself this enough on Tom's Hardware and Reddit, maybe it becomes true.
I mean, to a degree, I feel like there's people who have always bought NVIDIA, and they have to have something they can tell themselves for why NVIDIA is more popular than AMD outside of they just happen to be.
Mm-hmm.
Like they played the market better, with marketing and how they position their cards from like, I don't know if the 200 series, but certainly whether you like it or not, Fermi actually started to outsell the 400 and the 500 series started to outsell AMD or be close, and like 500 series through Maxwell.
Which interestingly, I would say probably the worst architecture NVIDIA has come out with since I've been in PC game, a fan of PC gaming. We'd have to
go to like pre 9000 GTX series to like find a worse one. Like maybe I think the 5000 was pretty bad supposedly, but
but that's like what? That's like 05 or something.
Yeah, we're going far back. We're going like 05, like somewhere between 03 and 06 or something.
Okay.
All right. Let us now then move on to story number 2. RTX 5000 supply rush leak. Now, this was something that wasn't initially necessarily going to be a story, but late Friday night, I started getting these quotes from sources in retail. And so I just want to read 2 of them. The first one here. On Friday, which is April 18th, we, this being a major online retailer, received about 10 times as many Blackwell cards as usual to our warehouse. So it seems that Nvidia is realizing they have a problem here. It was mostly RTX 5070 and 5070 Ti's, with some 16 gigabyte 5060 Ti's. Nope, no 8 gigabyte models, and a handful of 5080s. And so, yeah, they're mostly targeting RDNA 4 performance here, no RTX 5090s. And I did follow up on this, like 10 times as many, like maybe to this warehouse, a shipment of like, I don't know, somewhere around like 300 graphics cards when usually they'll receive 20 or 30. So this isn't like they sent twice as many and it won't make an impact. This is one warehouse. Something's going on here. Also, another source, this is a person that works at a major US retailer, says just received a couple hundred Blackwell GPUs at our location today. Again, this was the 18th. And I also asked a friend of mine that works at a different location. This place is brick and mortar stores. They received over 100 there for their location as well. Usually receive 10 to 30. So I don't know what's going on here, but for sure, but at least short term, it seems like all of a sudden Nvidia, I don't know if they're supplying as many cards as AMD, but yeah, this would be about as many as RDNA 4 has been receiving a couple times a week, at least in one shipment, and they're all cards that mostly seem to focus on RDNA 4 performance. So I don't know how short-lived this will be. I don't know if Nvidia just realized they screwed up a month ago, and this is the first cards to arrive off of boats in the United States or whatever. But I think this is worth pointing out. If you're looking for graphics cards, they're appearing in stock, and I have noticed that, like going on Best Buy's website, for example, I have started to see them. So just an FYI to everybody. At least right now, this second, Nvidia is all of a sudden ratcheting up supply. Not an extra couple cards a week, hundreds more to multiple locations.
I mean, if my mental math is right, that sounds like it's at least getting into the same ballpark as what AMD is supplying to brick and mortar stores, which
in every shipment, yeah.
Yeah, normally you would think they would ship a lot more, but I feel like that something like this should have a material impact on supply, and hopefully maybe for the next couple weeks you see prices go down a little bit, or maybe not balloon to like $1,000. So hopefully, or for like $1,000 plus for like a 5070. So hopefully in a bad year we have a couple more weeks of decent supply if you need to buy something. Like I could see this being the last time you actually want to buy for a long time.
Yeah, so I guess that's kind of the conclusion we would make. Keep your eyes open this month being late April. Keep your eyes open.
Late April, mid-May, maybe.
And we're hearing similar things in Europe as well, of course, as I've already harped about on this episode. So like just Europe, US, keep your eyes open. Something's going on here where things are being supplied in higher numbers than have been for months. If you miss the first wave, this wave will probably cost a little more on average. But then again, I don't know. Prices are seemingly going down in Europe. Like this might be your chance right here before who knows what happens with tariffs again. All right. Let us now move on from that brief update to story number 3. RX 9060 XT and RX 9070 GRE specs leaked, and release date has been pushed back. So first quoting from my leak from about the 9060 XT and 9070 GRE a couple weeks ago. So the RX 9060 XT will be 5 to 12% weaker, most likely, than the 7700 XT, but probably also a solid at least 10% faster than the 4060 Ti. So yes, this leak came out before the 5060 Ti launch. You would say it's probably going to come in slightly weaker than the 5060 Ti, but slightly stronger than the 4060 Ti. And so, yeah, it's stronger than the old $400 cards. Now, I say 400, and it's the pricing, and I highlight that price point because this is the part that has surprised me from what I was told. I was told that the 9060 XT might cost below 400, possibly well below, between 329 to 379 for the 16 gigabyte model. With me, I would suggest probably 350 will be the price, or And I know that a lot of us were hoping that the 9060 XT was going to like beat the 7700 XT, but I got to say, if it did, it'd probably be 400. If it's $330 or $350 for almost 7700 XT, which means almost 6800 performance, and except that actually has 16 gigabytes of RAM, that's pretty good. That's about the same price the 7600 XT was, with the same amount of RAM for 30% more performance, or maybe even more than that. And the 8 gigabyte model sounds like it will probably be $299, which again, I don't have much to say about that. The most I can say about a $299 8 gigabyte 9060 XT is that they are giving you better than 4060 Ti performance for the old price of the 4060. So I guess it's fair from the perspective of you're getting like a 6800 level of performance for 1080p gaming, but generally speaking, I won't recommend this if the price is even within $100 of the 16 gigabyte model. And so let me see here. Well, okay. Anyways, moving on to the editorialization. With gamers no longer holding space for Nvidia, can gamers now hold some for Radeon? Well, yes and no. The 9060 XT seems like a winner with decent performance and a good MSRP, and our sources say that significant volume will be available, more than they had for the 9070 and the 9070 XT launch. But it will still not be enough, most likely, as Nvidia vacates the market. We'll see how that develops, though. And AMD simply cannot keep up with market demand unless Nvidia starts quadrupling supply, even from 10xing supply, by the way. Expect to see MSRP cards sold out in minutes, queues at micro centers, and continued shortages. But the MSRP and launch supply seem to show that AMD is still trying to exploit Nvidia's weakness, which is good. Although, admittedly, alongside the good news, we also have some bad. We can confirm there is something weird going on with the 9060 XT's encoders, most likely, with sources telling us that AMD won't confirm to them if it has hardware encoding. Now, most people don't really use encoders or need them. Most CPUs now have good encoders and they're integrated graphics, unless I guess you're on AM4. But people who do encode, decode a lot should keep mind with this when they look at reviews and watch for if they include them. Worse also, though, the 9060 XT is seemingly being delayed. I had heard they were trying to launch by April 24th. I think months ago, me and other people leaked April was going to be the launch date, but now I'm hearing that it has been pushed back into later in Q2. And most sources tell me this is due to tariffs. Like everything, we can't avoid bringing up tariffs, unfortunately. Well, NVIDIA responded by launching the 5060 Ti as planned. I don't know. So I don't know. I hopefully that means there'll still be supply as well, which is the final thing I would note about this, which is like a week and a half ago or something, right? I was told there should be more supply than the 9070 and 9070 XT. But now that I'm hearing it's being delayed due to tariffs, I don't know, at least in the US, if the supply will be as good as we thought. Hopefully it will be, though. Oh, and I forgot to mention this 9070 GRE, 48 compute units, 192-bit. The great Radeon edition continues. I don't have much to say. Expect that to be, I guess, probably 20 to 30% faster than the 9060 XT while having less RAM. I haven't been given a price. It's mostly for the Chinese market. They can't even sell it there. I don't know.
Who knows this at this day and age?
What would I even price that? If it's $350 for a 16 gigabyte card, $429, I guess the same as the 16 gigabyte 5060 Ti. It was 20% faster. I don't know. I'd probably do $399. Anyways, Dan, what do you think of all this?
I mean, if the 9060 XT is close, if the 16 gigabyte model is like $350 and at the upper end of that performance expectation, it seems pretty great. Although, once again, in this day and age, it's really hard to talk about anything in reference to MSRP because I think everything is just going, at least in the US, is going to go way above MSRP because of the insane volatility we've decided to throw into the market for no reason. So, yeah, if it's relatively speaking about that same gulf in price between that and the 5060 Ti, I think the 9060 XT is probably the better choice, but we'll see how that shakes out.
Yeah. Well, on this note, Part DB and me writes in and says, the RX 9070 GRE sounds dumb from a naming perspective alone. So now we have a supposedly great Radeon edition that is weaker than the card that has no suffix, the 9070, and it counters to the previous example where the GRE models were typically more powerful than the vanilla ones with no suffix on models. In the US, yes, the 7900 GRE was, I guess, weaker than the XT, but the XT did have the XT moniker, and there was no 7900 non-XT. But I believe the 6700 GRE could mean anything. Like there was a 10 gigabyte model with a,
the GREs
are
always
everywhere. I don't know.
They don't make any sense to me.
I do agree. The great Radeon edition suffix makes, I mean, just really, this is becoming the SE. Like 5060 XE from Thermi, where SE is just like they had the 5060 Ti, the 5060, and then the worst yields 5060 SE, but it's sold to China, so they They want to pander to GRE, which used to mean Great Radeon Edition. See, this is where I go. I still don't think NVIDIA's hired Radeon marketing, because this is all types of levels of blunders that I can't even get into.
Well, they need the GRE because, I mean, it needs to be a 70 because it's just so they can say the Chinese market has a 70 for them. Because I mean, they used to have 5 monikers, if I'm remembering correctly, like this might make more sense as like a 9065 or whatever, but
I just think they should
don't
put D on it like NVIDIA does with 5090D. Call it the 9070 Dragon, which sounds cool, but Dragon, Great Radeon sounds like this should be the best model. Dragon just means a special model, because in China they don't care as much about VRAM, and so you can remove, 20% of the price and 10% of the performance and sacrifice VRAM, and just popular in China. I would just call it the Dragon Edition to fully pander to that market and not try to cling to a Rabbit moniker that doesn't exist anymore and is really counterintuitive.
Well, now we're just calling it Great Radeon Edition, which I don't know, sounds like 1984ish to me for some reason, where it's like there's some weird double speak in there, but I guess that's what we're calling it.
Yeah. All right. Smash actually writes in and says, will AMD AIBs release any more variants of the 9000 series? Well, probably, but he says, such as new models, white versions, and the like, because it seems like all AIBs are releasing like 20 different variants for 50 series GPUs. Or is this a case of NVIDIA paying them off to not allow things for AMD? Look, I think there is something. I mean, look, MSI said they're not even making RDNA 4 graphics cards this gen, to like trying to pander to getting more NVIDIA supply. At the same time, yeah, I mean, I think NVIDIA's like multiple times tried to make Asus like have more models for them than Radeon. So there's some of that, but I will say this. If we agree NVIDIA has like 80% of the market, wouldn't you expect there to be like 4 times as many models to pander to that portion of the market? Just not just trying to point out the obvious here, like maybe it isn't a conspiracy. Maybe NVIDIA just gets more models because they have more market share.
Yeah, I mean, why would you have the same number of production lines for 4 times fewer cards?
Yeah, I don't think you would. Quick Jumper writes in and says, Tom, I think there's a silver lining to the ongoing GPU shortages. First, it's giving AMD an opportunity to build a stronger position and gain market share. We saw with CPUs that it took time for hardware manufacturers to properly embrace AMD, but now they're implementing numerous optimizations for AMD platforms. Another positive development is that reviewers have started conducting value for money analysis based on real-world availability data. This seems like a healthy shift in the review landscape. Yeah, sure. After all, it doesn't make sense for reviewers to strongly recommend GPUs that are perpetually understocked or where most available inventory consists of overbuilt, overpriced AIB models. Do you think these developments might lead to a more balanced GPU ecosystem in the long run? I think the continued shenanigans have forced reviewers to become smarter in how they analyze things, and I think that's a good thing. Were it to be a fluke, like how the 30 series panned out, and then the 40 series was normal, the 50 was normal, and then there was a fluke again, maybe no one really learned the lesson. But certainly, I guess I would agree that I like that Radeon has an opening right now, and I think it's probably good that every reviewer has been forced to finally get through their heads. You can't just go 20% less, 20% more. I say good. And these reviews are really turning into like an analysis of the market, which they always should have been.
Well, they have to in this day and age, where in the past they really didn't have to as much, because I don't know, when I was younger, you could typically find a couple models that were close to or at MSRP, and GPUs would typically fall in price within a year of being released, and that's just not the market we exist in anymore. So MSRPs continue to be less and less relevant, so you have to look at them from the holistic view, like what are these actually selling for? Where in the past, you can, even if you're doing a somewhat dumb analysis, that dumb analysis pretty much works, because if you're hunting hard enough, you could find it a $350 MSRP model for any GPU if the MSRP was $350. Where now, hell, the cheapest thing you might find for a $350 MSRP is like $600.
JHH 50 series available on eBay writes in. Jensen Wang says 50 series available on eBay. Okay. With AMD having promised that the future is fusion, why is no one holding them accountable for their lack of success at doing R&D into the field of fusion? You know, guys, this is a joke. We will include the AMD Future is Fusion logo for this one, but I have to say, I don't know why I let this question get through, because I don't think there's much for us to say.
Well, do you think they're going to achieve cold fusion at AMD, Tom?
The only thing I'll say is that is one of those like Science magazine articles we see every 5 seconds, you know, of like in Paris, they've almost achieved cold fusion. You know what I mean?
Yeah, or yeah, the
battery one's the most annoying one for me.
Yeah, that big story about fusion with the what was it? We've achieved ignition with fusion, and that was going everywhere for 2 weeks.
All right, let me know when I'm charging a car because of fusion powering some power plant. All right, let us now move on to story number 4. Are you too depressed to go outside because of how expensive Microsoft software is? Well, there's absolutely no need for that. Just go to CDkeyoffer.com. That's right, this piece of content is once again sponsored by CDkeyoffer.com. And I say once again because they've been a fantastic sponsor of Moore's Law is Dead and its community for many years. And that's because they always deliver the best pricing reliably for Microsoft products like Windows operating systems, Office software, and they also sell games and other things as well. So make sure you check them out, especially during their Easter sale going on right now. And if you do, use offer code BrokenSilicon to save 25% on all Microsoft software, and then Die Shrink to save 3% off on everything else on the website. The community uses them. I use them for my new Zen 4 X3D desktop. And Jesse here needs to stop moping around, and I think use them as well. So that's once again, support Moore's Law is Dead by going to CDkeyoffer.com through the links below today. Okay, Jesse. It's okay. Moore's Law is Dead, Zen 6 leaks seemingly confirmed. All right, first here, just going to read from an AMD press release. AMD today announced its next generation AMD EPYC processor, codenamed Venice, is the first HPC product in the industry to be taped out and brought up on the TSMC advanced 2nm process technology. This highlights the strength of AMD and TSMC semiconductor manufacturing partnerships to co-optimize new design architectures with leading-edge process nodes. It also marks a major step forward in the execution of the AMD data center CPU roadmap. With Venice on track to launch next year, AMD has also announced the successful bring-up and validation of its 5th-generation EPYC CPU products in TSMC's new fab facility in Arizona, underscoring its commitment to U.S. manufacturing. Saying, we are proud to have AMD be a lead HPC customer for our advanced 2nm process technology in the TSMC Arizona fab. It's good they're making it there, though, I suppose. It wouldn't be a 2025 news episode without more on our several Zen 6 leaks, it seems. This time we have something perhaps more exciting than the leak itself. It's confirmation, breaking the tradition of Apple being the first to TSMC's newest node. That's a big deal. AMD and TSMC announced that it is AMD's Venice to be the first HPC product out in N2. This confirms information about chiplets of Zen 6 using N2 for the core chiplets. By the way, let me just jump in here. How many of you losers in the comments called me stupid for saying AMD is going from 4nm, skipping 3 to 2? I was right again. You were wrong. I'm sorry. I have to dunk sometimes on you losers because I'm so sick of this, like making stuff up. There's no way this would happen. It is happening.
Well,
this channel also leaked Venice first. And we also were called stupid for saying that some Zen 6 products would launch in 26. They're going to, nerds. They're going to. Subscribe to us on YouTube. All right, go on, Dan.
Well, I guess that was confirmed within a couple months. So, or not even a couple months, a couple weeks, right?
Yeah.
I think we were talking about this story, I think, last news episode.
To be fair, we've been talking about this in a series of Zen 6 leaks. And there's been Zen 6 leaks a long time ago, years ago, where we were suggesting it could be 2nm as well. But yes, I would say we doubled and tripled down over the past 2 months.
Yeah. So fist bump.
Fist bump. Remember, support us on Patreon. Support us on Patreon, people. This is real journalism we're doing to bring in this stuff. And I don't know how much I really have to say about it, though. You know, we've already confirmed all of this. It's nice to see it publicly confirmed. I guess the only thing I would especially note, it's not really new, but exciting, is them saying 2026. You know, who knows? Maybe that's just tape out, but I've long heard that some products should launch for Zen 6 next year. I even heard for a while that some could launch this year, maybe, but I don't think so. But I think it's pretty clear AMD is going to have Zen 6 out before Nova Lake, most likely, which we're about to get to. And so there's just is not sitting still, as I keep saying. There's always something new around the corner. Buy now if you need something now. If you don't, there will be Zen 6. If you say, I'm going to wait till Zen 6, but I could use something now, but I'm going to wait. Just remember, then there will be Zen 7 within 2 years after that. So,
well, but Zen 7 is when they'll stop, right?
Yeah, that's when they will just stop making new things, because, of course. And then that's like, but when's the next Sandy Bridge where I can just hold on to something for 10 years? Never again, because there's competition.
Although, I don't know, if you bought a 5800 or 5700, or like 5800 years ago, it's still probably fine for most things.
Yeah. The only thing that's changed is I think people forget that when Sandy Bridge came out, most people gamed at 60 frames per second. And of course, that might still work even in a lot of games now with a Sandy Bridge i7, maybe not an i5. And 144 hertz was pretty much a thing. And so that's remained the thing until now. I think a thing that's changed is it went from most people gaming at 60, some at 144, to most gaming at 144, many wanting to game at 240, 360. There's like 500 hertz monitors now. And so I do think every now and then people need to remember, like, my CPU is, whatever. Like I'm right now using a Zen 4 X3D CPU. I upgraded my desktop, and most of my games can run 240 hertz, but some I might cap at 200 or lower. And it's like, well, you could use a faster CPU. And it's like, well, to be fair, we used to be okay with 120, and now we're like at 240 hertz in way more complicated games. And so I guess there's more of a push to upgrade now, though, because the monitors just keep getting so much better. There's a real monitor stagnation for like a decade a while ago.
Yeah.
All right. AI Hollow Knight writes in and says, can you 3D stack TSMC N3 family nodes with TSMC N6? There's a way too much demand, I think, for N4 and N3 wafers, but N6 is a ton of unused capacity. Example, could a 3 nanometer Zen 6 CCD still use N6 for the V cache, or does it have to be N4? I guess I can't confirm the V cache thing, but like which node they're going to use for this generation of V cache for Zen 6. So that wouldn't surprise me if they stuck with 6 nanometer or something. Although, yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see on that one, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what node it is. Don't write that down. But I will say this, AI Hollow Knight. I feel like I keep seeing in the Moore's Law Z Discord, like saying, what are they going to do about capacity? What are they going to do about capacity? And I would remind you, I have leaked that they are probably going to use 6 nanometer for some of the IO dies for desktop, and they're using 3 nanometer for the others, and they're using 3 nanometer for a lot of the APUs. So I know you're worried about capacity, but for 2 nanometer, those chiplets are like not that big. I think I leaked they're 75 millimeter squared, and everything else is pretty much using other nodes. And they're still leaving 6 nanometer capacity for like the PlayStation 6 and some other products. Give it a year and a half. Like 2 nanometer will be in demand, but they're still going to use a lot of 3 nanometer. And I'm not sure how, and they're still using 4 nanometer for much of graphics cards for the next 2 years. I don't, and the PS4 Pro. So I don't know. Let's not assume there will be the same supply constraints. Will it be some? Yes, but there's always supply constraints when new products use bleeding edge nodes. And I just think that's something you have to accept. There's always going to be a supply constraint when Zen 2 uses 7 nanometer, and then they move to, 5 and then 4 nanometer. And they accept it because that's the beginning of the generation, and people are still buying Zen 3 AI Hollow Knight. And so that's why it's new. It's going to have supply constraints, and then it won't for most of its product life.
Yeah, and we still live in a world where AMD is trying to penetrate the market more. So going for unlimited supply might be a stupid idea for them.
Yeah. And I think this is just, we don't know how much supply they're buying up. The fact that they're leapfrogging Apple on this one is actually pretty crazy to me.
I mean, who knows? Zen 6 could be the generation where they really go for it with OEMs.
And, they want to win. They want to keep the performance crown over Intel. And so we'll see. Maybe they'll be expensive, but they just buy up a ton of the capacity. Like they're actually willing to outbid Apple for some of this. And let's wait and see what happens here. It's already crazy they're going with 2 nanometer. I don't think they go with 2 nanometer to like make 10 wafers. Like this would probably be some massive strategy here. And they're using the plant in Arizona, so that's more capacity too. So I don't know. I wouldn't assume they're just doing this to win a benchmark. They're also probably doing this because they have some bigger plan to actually have enough supply. AI generated fish writes in and says, piercing together what we know so far about Strix Halo's launch, what's the bottleneck in production here? It's not using standard desktop chiplets, is that it? Or the low OEM demand due to high pricing and unproven demand for a new type of APU? I want to get excited about Medusa Halo, but AMD does not have a history of hype, but does have a history of hyping things. And then their GPUs are in 1 to 3 laptops, which are in low supply and weirdly specced out. So I'd say 2 things. AI generated fish. Number 1, it's new. So same thing happened with Renoir, a new APU platform, AMD competing in a market or a segment they hadn't before. Before it was just standard laptop. Now it's, Apple mega APUs, Apple-like mega APUs.
Yeah.
And anytime there's a new platform, it's going to take time to develop. And over time, Renoir had hard to get. Cezanne, not as hard to get. Rembrandt, very hard to get at first, then easy to get. Phoenix, a little easier to get. And Hawkpoint, easy to get. Strix, easy to get. Like, it's probably going to be a similar cadence, maybe faster or more accelerated. But I think with the Halo series, we're just like, this is brand new stuff. So just let them cook,
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully Medusa Halo, they already have their relationships built or to introduce more models that they designed with Strix Halo in mind.
Like a D-Day metaphor, Strix Halo is the first guys on the beach. Medusa may land easier.
Yeah.
What do you want me to say, guys? I'm a white guy in my 30s. I'm going to start making World War II references. It's going to happen.
No.
It's going to happen. Pretty soon it's just going to be, I don't think it's going to be the History Channel. That joke's too old because the History Channel isn't the History Channel anymore. It's Pawn Stars now. But
the History Channel is now Pawn Stars and Aliens.
Stars and Aliens. So I don't think I'll be watching that. I'll be watching just tons of YouTube documentaries probably. But here's the second point. It does have unique CCDs, and I don't think that helped. So,
yeah.
And I will be curious, and I think we can kind of see a lineage to Zen 6 here. Like the CCDs and the way the fabric connects to the I/O die is different from desktop Zen 5 with Strix Halo, and it's lower latency. There are some benchmarks where it wildly outperforms desktop Zen 5. And so I think there's something there where they learn things making Strix Halo that didn't get into Granite Ridge desktop Zen 5 that will probably be in Zen 6 and hopefully all of Zen 6, so it is all interchangeable. And so even though I know there's like an N2X and then an N2P variant for Zen 6, I do hope they're more interchangeable so that like at least some models are easier to supply. Because I will admit, the unique CCD thing probably is not helping supply.
Yeah, if they're more modular next generation, that would be great. So they could hopefully shift supply more easily back and forth to whatever is in demand.
Bullethead writes in and says, is the reason that we're not seeing all that much NPU utilization is because software developers are waiting on first party, possibly even open source software to implement NPU and GPU load balancing? Because AMD just launched a new LLM client whose selling point seems to just be NPU iGPU load balancing. And I'm going to skip some of this here. Once installed, you launch Gaia and begin exploring its various agents and capabilities. There are 2 versions. Yeah, so I don't know, Dan. Why do you think nothing uses these NPUs that take up die space yet?
I don't know. I just don't think that. I think there was over enthusiasm about the hardware before anybody actually thought of a software solution it was solving. Like, I think there's a ton of enthusiasm because it's useful in research, and then people didn't realize that it's not that useful outside of a few applications. I don't know.
Yeah, because look at like the whole Microsoft recall thing with Windows 11 that they like just backtracked on. I don't, and they still, I don't know. Someone's probably going to write in the comments that they actually are implementing it tomorrow, and I was an idiot for saying this. But clearly, this just all of the AI features, I will say, aren't being rolled out as smoothly as initially people thought they would, and I don't really have a solid answer. Right? I think I think at the end of the day, no one's finding a super useful thing to use these for, or the MPUs still aren't strong enough to use them well. And I
Mhm.
can say that like using the NPU and not even using it, using the Copilot button on this minis for a mini PC I've had over here when I mess around with it that doesn't use the NPU. I mean, I would tell it what its name is. It would forget it in 30 minutes. And it, there were just some, it was more accurate for sure than Google's Gemini AI, but it hedged so hard to not be inaccurate that it wasn't useful half the time when I used a Copilot to search things on the web for me. So I just think that there's a thing here where it's just not really that ready, and either it needs more processing power than the NPUs can provide, or at the end of the day, no one, it's a chicken and egg problem where like developers don't know, is the MPU good enough? Should we put everything into making a 40 tops requirement do the thing we want it to? And we know new ones may be there, but we don't know if anyone will use this. I don't know. I think there's a chicken and egg of like trying to find a useful use of this and deciding if this is where we stop. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah.
All right. Let us now then move on to story number 5. Intel's next generation Nova Lake CPUs will seemingly use a new LGA 1954 socket. So I'm going to quote here from Tom's Hardware, and then I actually have a couple of leaks. Shipping documents sourced from NBD Ltd purport that Intel might switch to the LGA 1954 platform for its next generation Nova Lake processors on desktop via OLRAC. This is accompanied by PCH tooling likely intended for the 900 series chipsets. Importantly, these listings do not indicate an imminent launch, especially since Nova Lake has officially been confirmed as a 2026 product. What's really official that Intel says, but Nova Lake is officially part of Intel's product family, so they have acknowledged it exists. At least I agree with that. Set to supersede Arrow Lake next year. Preliminary silicon configurations allege 2 clusters of 8-core Coyote Cove B cores. These are an Arctic Wolf E cores. This is, of course, exclusively leaked by this channel, complemented by 4 low-power LPE cores in the SoC tile, adding up to 52 hybrid cores. Intel's engineers explore. Yeah, let's skip ahead here. The information within the manifest implies that Intel's actively distributing LGA 1954 testing hardware to its global facilities. Specifically, these are not fully fledged motherboards, but appear to be some form of specialized interposer to test voltage regulation for the upcoming platform. Either way, these kits are designated as Nova Lake S, the short as NVLS, the shorthand for Nova
Mhm.
Lake S. So this heavily does suggest that. Now, I want to say throw 2 last minute leaks here because this is a last minute story added to the notes, and then I reached out to a couple of sources. One source tells me that it's not necessarily finalized, but they have heard about an LGA 1954. I'm actually looking at what they said to me on the side monitor right now. And that it was originally possibly some embedded thing, but they might use it also as they socket and eventually platform for Nova Lake and possibly even the Arrow Lake refresh, this person claims, although I'm wondering if they've mixed that up.
Jesus.
And the only reason they would do that is if they made the NPU so much stronger that they needed, or they claim to need new pins. I don't know. AMD seems to be able to do a lot without needing new pinouts, but whatever. Or not new pinouts, new pin configurations. But I have another source here, an Intel source that tells me they were debating whether Nova Lake should continue on LGA 1851 or 1954, last I heard. And I have specifically heard of a 1954, meaning this person can't confirm if they're going to use it, but they've heard of this configuration and seen this being shipped with Nova Lake. That's why we made this main story too, because sources last minute confirmed this to me. So, like, yeah, it sounds like at a minimum, Nova Lake's going to require a new socket. So, what do you think of that, Dan?
Not that much to say other than good job, Intel. Just keep that platform longevity not being a thing. That's when you're when you're on the back foot, really losing market share and trust with consumers. Having platforms that last a quarter or half as long as your competitor really doesn't help.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would say is I continue to believe that this isn't necessarily like a nefarious thing. It's an incompetence
Sure.
problem. It's like you can't convince me that it was all due to milking. I think that would explain some of it, but I don't know. When you go back and look at that, they had KB Lake, and then they went to Coffee Lake 1, and then Coffee Lake 2, and then Comet Lake. And I believe these all require different sockets. To me, there's just something there where there's a lack of uniform leadership, and there's no one at the top going, hey guys, we're going to be competing with AMD really hard. Maybe we should just go to the Comet Lake socket now so that all these are on the same socket, because surely that's just something we should get ahead of. That's something I believe AMD has done, where they go, does Zen 6 really need a new platform for consumers? Are they really going to buy expensive DDR6 right when it launches? Maybe we should just, if it can support DDR5, do that, which is what I believe they are doing with Zen 6 on AM5 to support it. And then you look at Zen 7 and they're like, okay, well, Zen 7 is definitely going to require DDR6. Well, what will Zen 8 probably require? Let's plan ahead for a socket when you need it,
Yeah.
and Intel doesn't do that.
Yeah, it could, or from the outside, it does seem to speak to a lack of cohesiveness or communication between the various teams working on different architectures at Intel, where, I don't know, it seems like they're all just doing their own thing at a certain point.
Yeah.
Or that's a possible explanation. I don't know if there's anything to that. But
yeah, and it's like, we've seen pictures. Actually, I may know a source who maybe be able to physically get a hold of one of those Meteor Lake desktop chips. And it's just like, so you thought Meteor Lake might be on LGA 1700, but then it was, or no, 1851. And then you would go to Air Lake, but then it wasn't. So that was kind of a waste to have Air Lake use a new platform if you're just going to go to another one. To me, all of this is just that. Them not planning ahead and going, if Meteor Lake's not going to use 1851, maybe we should just skip 1851, and whatever we're going to use after that should be what Air Lake's on, especially if there's a small chance Air Lake Refresh will even be on it. That's just ridiculous. PRTD BNME writes in and says, in light of the LGA 1954 rumors, they remind me of an aspect of Intel's market dominance and stagnation 10 years ago. Intel had LGA 1156, then 1155, then 1150, then 51, where the difference between those sockets were just a few pins, sometimes even going down and then back up. It is clear to me now that the reason they did that is to force motherboard upgrades once every other generation. See, back then, I think that is pretty much true.
Possible.
Yeah. Well, the physical sockets themselves are similar to each other. My question is that with the LGA 1954 rumors, what is preventing Intel from designing a single socket that can last for many generations? Why is it that they always limit their sockets to 2 generations of a similar architecture? Well, they do not have the market and mindshare dominance they once had 10 years ago to justify it anymore. Again, what we just said. I probably should have read this question before we kept talking about it. Like, I think it's like no one told one team that, hey, we should make 1954 be what you have Arrow Lake use, and we should skip 1851 if Meteor Lake isn't actually going to be launched on it. They didn't, and so now there's just, again, it's a huge company, a bloated company still, that just has people working on different products. None of them talk to each other. All of a sudden, we just get new platforms every year or so because they aren't talking to each other. That's my answer.
Yeah, I mean, it really speaks to the fact that I mean, Intel is bigger than AMD and Nvidia combined, and they put out worse products than both of them. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. All right. Well, let us now move on to story number 6. All right. PlayStation 6 handheld leaked again. Quoting from Tech Power Up, with Carbon Cry noting that it was heavily edited for readability. The mysterious handheld is said to be powered by a 15-watt SoC manufactured on a non-specific 3-nanometer node, according to Kepler L2 on Twitter, that posted that PlayStation's ruined handheld is capable of running PS5 generation games. It's something we've already confirmed. However, at reduced resolution and or frame rate due to bandwidth and power restrictions. They also see a PS6 portable gaming performance being somewhere between the Xbox S and the PlayStation 5, depending on what Sony decides to do. But yeah, so there's that. There's also PlayStation portable leaks that keep percolating on NeoGAF as well. Half of these are just people talking that seem semi-informed by friends, by the way. But long story short, multiple leaks are continuing to come out that echoed the exclusive reporting of Moore's Law is Dead, I believe about a year ago now, on an upcoming PlayStation handheld. Specifically, Kepler thinks that the handheld will play PlayStation 5 titles, lower resolutions, and they say the SoC is designed for 15 watts, a similar power level to Steam Deck's Van Gogh APU. With a better node and underlying architecture, PlayStation 6 portable, therefore, could truly push handheld gaming forward, assuming it launches within a few years, as one would hope, given the length of the current generation consoles. And so what I mostly take this is again, the leaks we've put out are being further confirmed, and I would just add that Yeah, a PlayStation 6 one is also heavily rumored in circles that seem to know things ahead of time as well. And I continue to believe that is the move Sony should make, is they should skip a PlayStation 5 portable, especially if it would be different hardware, and just make a PS6 model so that it can keep going forward. So that you have that one design that can go on for the next 10 years instead of a PS5 that's about to be replaced in 2 years.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I mean, with a PS6 portable, if it could run the same titles as the PS6, just at a lower resolution, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah. All right, let me see here. Let me skip this one and just go to the final story, which is quite a long one. Let me say, story number 7, tariff update. Nvidia misleads customers, AMD projects losses, and Apple airlifts iPhone. So I'm just going to quote little things here from various sources and get to the editorialization. First source is from Reuters. Nvidia did not warn at least some major customers in advance about new U.S. export rules. It was told about a week ago, requiring it to obtain licenses to sell its China-focused artificial intelligence chips, like the 5090D, I believe. According to two sources familiar with the matter, Reuters quoted again from a different article. Meanwhile, Nvidia said it would take $5.5 billion in charges after the U.S. government limited exports of its H20 artificial intelligence chips to China, a key market for one of its most popular chips. And at the same time, AMD expects charges of up to $800 million due to the latest curbs by the Trump administration exports of advanced processors from China, the company said on Wednesday. Now moving on to The Verge, who is being quoted that Razer's upcoming Blade 16 and other laptops are no longer available for pre-order or purchase in the United States. When asked recently if tariffs might affect Razer's prices or availability, as public relations manager Andy Johnson told The Verge, "We do not have a comment on this stage regarding tariffs." Yeah, seems like you're just scared to admit what you're already doing. Now reporting from Heist.de, as the Taiwanese financial newspaper Commercial Times reports, Acer, Asus, Lenovo, Dell, and HP are suspending deliveries to the U.S. This means that the availability of new products there is likely to be limited for the foreseeable future. And finally, quoting Reuters again, tech giant Apple chartered cargo flights to ferry 600 tons of iPhones, or as many as 1.5 million of them, to the United States from India after it stepped up production there in an effort to beat President Donald Trump's tariffs, sources told Reuters. So, yep, tariffs are here and everybody's winning, right? Sarcasm aside, we see exactly what we expected and reported on previously. Companies are tallying millions and billions in near immediate losses. Others are rushing to ship in their products if their margins could sustain things like airlifting, and others are taking the more obvious response to just wait. No one is sure what will happen with tariffs. No one can even say precisely how they work, how they will be enforced. Least of all, the U.S. government can't even seem to say. It seems what is clear is the continued tech blockade of China, and it is a blockade at this point, by the way. Now, even products designed to get through sanctions are barred. AMD and Nvidia are expecting significant losses, and it seems Nvidia might have hoped, and I think this is an interesting thing reading between the lines here, Nvidia might have hoped to prevent the tightening of sanctions, and maybe that's why they didn't tell their partners yet. Because I believe he had like a. Let me continue. See, the way sanctions work is that companies are told ahead of time to prepare or to raise concerns. But per Reuters sources, Nvidia didn't give advanced warning to at least some of their customers, and that likely means that Jensen Huang hoped to convince Trump to allow H20 sales into China, but failed, at least for now, because I believe they had some dinner or something, and then after the dinner, he had to tell them too late. It'll be interesting to see if Singapore becomes Nvidia's largest market for future earnings, like it already seems to be, to smuggle in stuff to China. Also, DHL. Yes, the massive shipping company DHL just suspended deliveries to the U.S. for anything that costs over $800, which is a lot of things you use DHL for. So that was a last-minute addition, by the way. That is just... Guys, not just like companies, DHL doesn't want to bother with shipments to America anymore, unless it's cheap ones that I think get through that de minimis thing.
Get through the tariff, yeah. Well, I guess those are the versions of getting around tariffs that everybody is discussing. There's some companies that are like, screw it, we're just not dealing with them right now. You have Apple that's hoping to get around tariffs by changing shipping routes, and then Nvidia that's just hoping they could reason with Trump last minute and failed for now, but
even lying to customers because they felt like they had to be able to, but now they didn't, and it's going to backfire on them even harder.
Or who knows? Maybe it won't. Maybe in a week and a half, though, those sanctions will just be reversed because everything is stupid and erratic.
Yeah, and so like one spiel I want to say too is like actually our tariff content has had higher upvote ratios than average. So anyone who thinks that this is an
Surprise.
unpopular subject is wrong. It is a popular subject because this is affecting everybody, and people want. I think there's a hunger out there for people who cover the tech space to not be babies and scared to talk about the number one thing affecting gaming hardware this year, because it is tariffs. And so Moore's Law said we're not afraid to do that, and it's reflected mostly positively. Now, of course, there are some people that are attack us, and there's the usual canned things like graphics cards are exempt. They're not. Or like all these other things. And half of those annoying comments are probably just confused because we're all confused, and the news changes every day, and they're clinging to the thing that they think will make them right for what they are pretending is a sports team. It's not a sports team. This is stuff where things are being hurt and people are being hurt. So actually think about what you're rooting for. This isn't sports anymore, people. This is real policy that is changing things. And I guess that's my main point I want to make right now is when people say things like, that's not true, this was just said. For the most part, when me and Dan talk about tariffs on this channel, we're talking about things that have already happened. You can't tell us we're wrong. HP did suspend sales, and even if they started them again, there will be a gap in sales that will raise prices. DHL did stop shipping for things over $800. You can't say we're wrong. We're reporting on things that have already happened, like companies focusing new supply of Nvidia cards mostly to Europe. That has happened. That is not a theory. Right. And so that's what I would say is the chaos is the problem. I'm sure on Monday before this episode comes out, and then on Tuesday after and Wednesday, these will just change and yo-yo back and forth. But try to notice, like we're reporting on Apple, they have airlifted iPhones. Intel, well, probably Intel to some degree, but Nvidia and AMD are taking immense losses. Will they recover them in the future? Sure. Say they will if you want to believe they will. But we're reporting on the problems that have already happened and telling you how that's going to affect you now. So those comments that say we're wrong, we're not wrong. We reported on something that happened a day or a week ago and how that's going to affect you in the future, because we're not mostly bothering to try to guess how this will pan out. We just know it will probably be bad even if things go in a certain way.
Well, and it's hard to predict exactly how things will pan out because the way a lot of these policies are written, even experts don't seem to understand what they say half the time.
Yeah, like, I just had Hogue on Broken Silicon, who's a business attorney that often deals with disputes having to do with tariffs and trade. And I would quote him here again. I really recommend this episode. I think it's one of the better ones over the past couple of years. The way he put it is, it is my job to do this sometimes. I could sit down right now, Tom, and tell you exactly how much it would cost to switch versus now. I could go through every component and every little thing and where it comes from. And I could genuinely, that is my job sometimes. I could genuinely tell you what it would cost. But I'm not going to spend billable hours doing that for customers because I know that will change the next day and that would be a waste of their money. So yeah, I mean, that's what it all comes down to. These things are changing back and forth. But at the end of the day, I guess, and my major point too is, at the end of the day, even if you see tomorrow Trump say he's lifted this and that tariff, a lot of companies are still going to suspend trade with the U.S. and move production out of the U.S. or away from having to depend on the U.S., I would say, because they don't know if that's going to change in a week. And they're going to give it 90 days. So I think there's going to be at least 3 months of just people don't want to bother talking to the U.S. while they wait to see, like a wildcat has just emerged at a dinner party and everyone's like, there's a tiger walking around, let's just not move. And then wait to make sure the tiger's gone before we start talking again. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Techno writes in, with the U.S. economy being made weaker by tariffs and other political situations, he coughed, could we actually see the return to normal prices in the rest of the globe? Since Nvidia and AMD base their card MSRPs on the U.S. dollar, then convert for elsewhere, presumably the dollar continues to weaken at this rate for the next few months. Yeah, the U.S. dollar is weakening. We could see prices drop by around 10 to 15% in global markets by the summer, meaning that after inflation, the 5080 would have a similar MSRP to that of the 1080 in many European countries. I don't say 1080, but the overall premise is plausible, yes. If the US dollar weakens and more supply is sent to countries that are not the US compared to previous generations traditionally, yeah, you're already seeing it. You are seeing prices for RTX go down in Europe while they go up in the US. Yes. Again,
Yeah.
and this is us not predicting. It's already happened. It's already happened.
Yeah. I mean, that also depends on, well, not, I mean, you could see relative MSRPs go down, but I wouldn't bet that that will reliably make prices go down permanently. If supply goes down, you might just see prices go up like they are in the US globally too.
Mhm.
Although probably not as severely because we're not dealing with if that GPU was assembled in China, you're not dealing with whatever the hell we're at 185% tariffs. I don't know what it
3000%.
is.
Again, it's effectively a blockade. So,
Yeah.
all right. Now let us move on to the wrap up. All right. First one here, Dan. Dragon Range refresh is official. I gotta say, I don't have a lot to say about rebranding Zen 4 for.
Rebrandion strikes again.
I mean, I'm
Tom.
sure this is just leftover Zen 4 supply
Mhm.
that's binned higher because it is easier to bin it higher. I would be surprised if this was around for a long time, unless genuinely this is just how they're deciding to get rid of oversupply. I mean, I guess they have to keep making Zen 4 to a degree for their server
Well, they have
customers.
presumably they have some deal struck in with an OEM to put these in CPU in laptops. So it'll probably be around for some amount of time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so, but I don't have anything to say about this. Zen 4 is
No.
fine. You're using a Zen 4 system. Zen 5 is better. Zen 4 is fine. Van Gogh might finally be coming to do it yourself. I thought this was interesting. Let me see here. There's a Ryzen AI Z2 Extreme. Then there was the Z2A. And a lot of people weren't sure what that was, but some new data is emerging that the Z2A APU may be Van Gogh, and we might be able to finally
No.
benchmark, you know, there might be other handhelds that have the same APU in the Steam Deck. Or who knows? I think it would be interesting if a mini PC got the Z2A, and then you could really do some heavy testing with different TDP levels in like a more
Mhm.
traditional form factor. I think that'd be so. I don't know. That's something to watch out for. Nvidia supposedly fixes drivers. Although, let me look here. Dead AI writes in and says Nvidia can't keep getting away with this crap. The newest driver fixes black screens. I was having black screen issues. It did fix them, by the way. But broke
Jesus.
driver telemetry that's emerging, like clock speed, temp, power monitoring. What is going? And it's also affecting the 30 and the 40 series. What is wrong with them? How can they keep effing things up this badly? And I editorialized that a little bit. There's a lot of not saying effing crap, a lot of more swearing that I just got to skip. But I don't know. For me, the new NVIDIA drivers seem to fix some issues that I did have. I didn't really have any issues, but I just moved to a 4K OLED 240 hertz monitor, so I got that, a 240 hertz 1440p one, and then my old 4K 121. So I'm kind of pushing the limits of what the bandwidth the 4090 can supply over DisplayPort. And I
Mhm.
think that was causing some black screen issues. They're gone now. They're all fixed. So I'm happy about that. And luckily, I don't really monitor anything anymore because I just don't overclock my 4090 anymore. I just have it in the low power BIOS switch and I'm letting it run. But yeah, I don't know. This is more evidence that NVIDIA may have fixed one problem and caused another. And I don't know. It just feels like they hired the RDNA 1 driver team.
Yeah, good job.
Also, NVIDIA Zora RTX demo was provided. I actually meant to try it out, but I couldn't before you showed up, Dan, for Easter weekend.
Damn me.
But it is a rather large download too, and extracting a 108 like gigabyte zip was actually kind of annoying. So that's why I didn't get to it. But I'll probably be messing with that for the next week. It'll be interesting. TSMC moves 30% of 2 nanometer to the US. Again, and worth noting that this thing is happening. Again, to go to that reader mail about what is AMD going to do with 2 nanometer supply. I don't think they would have chosen 2 nanometer AI Hollow Knight unless they thought they could get enough supply. And TSMC is rapidly expanding it in the United States, so maybe it won't be a big issue.
Yeah.
Now this one's again, these are not major stories, but I think this is worth mentioning. Nvidia, I'm sorry, I always do that. Nintendo revised the Switch 2 product info and removed variable refresh rate support from official sites.
I don't know what that means.
What is going on with Nintendo?
I don't know. Like we said last time talking about the Switch, something weird is going on internally at Nintendo. I know we've been speculating about that for like a couple of years now at this point, but there's too much weird shit at this point to deny. Like something has to be going on there.
I'm trying to remember if there was anything equivalent with like Sony like this, because to my memory, right, Sony eventually added 1440p support to the PlayStation 5. Way longer it took them to put it on there than I thought it should have taken. But they did add it, and they didn't claim it had it until it did. And I don't think they really, and they added FreeSync support later. I don't remember them saying it's like on the box FreeSync until it and then removing it. Like, they tend to just take a long time to add stuff, but they eventually do at PlayStation.
Mm-hmm.
Can you think of anything like they removed the 4K? I have to mention this, or the 8K thing from their boxes, I guess. So I guess that's comparable, but they didn't brag about it running 8K a whole lot. And Nintendo put VRR in a lot of official announcements, and they now removed it. This thing's been done for years. How could they not know if they're going to have VRR support?
I don't know. I mean, I'm holding on and just hoping this is some weird oversight, like they've omitted it from some marketing material, but I don't know. I really don't know why at the last minute they're like, no more VRR support. That makes no sense to me.
Yeah. All right, and the final one here, I just threw it in because it involves tech, and this is insane to me. Tesla sued for allegedly faking odometer readings to avoid warranty repairs. And it's not the first time someone's claimed this. I believe this is them like, they changed the odometer so they don't need to pay for a warranty at the last minute or something. So like, you're about to be out of warranty, and then they speed it up so they don't have to do it.
I'm starting to think I shouldn't get a Model Y, Tom.
Yeah, I don't know. Besides the fact that it feels really cheap compared to competing cars. I say that as someone who tried out a Model Y somewhat recently and was I unimpressed compared to the competition. I don't know what to say. I mean, there's not really a whole lot to say. It's not even gaming hardware, but it involves tech, and it's like, that sounds highly illegal for multiple reasons.
Does the Model Y have Navi 23 in it, or whichever?
I don't remember. Some Teslas do.
Okay.
So
it's tangentially related.
Sure. All right. Well, that is going to do it for this shorter, but I think fully featured episode of Broken Silicon.
Like the Model Y.
I'd argue if it's fully featured when I have to use a frickin' touchscreen to control the AC. Just give me dials on cars, guys. The dials still work. The dials and the buttons. Give me the dials and the buttons. Don't give me a button too for like reverse. Let me move a stick, because then otherwise I have to like, which button did I press the right one? It's dangerous. It's dangerous. But yeah, as usual, remember, support Moore's Law is dead on YouTube. I think like almost half of you aren't even subscribed. Please double check that you're subscribed to the Moore's Law YouTube channel and ring the bell button. Tell your friends about us. Comment below. Share this podcast and consider supporting us on Patreon. We just put out another over 1 hour die shrink, kind of a bonus Broken Silicon, going over Nvidia's Mindshare and the 5060 Ti situation. And we just did some interviews with developers. There's a ton of just hundreds of die shrinks there for you, even if you just join us at the lowest tier. You get access to the Discord where you can interact with me, Dan, the team. There's people who work at Intel and AMD and Nvidia in the Moore's Law Discord, where people will ask questions and they will go, yes, that is how that driver works. That's why that happened. Like, there's thousands of people in that Discord that work in this industry. And it's probably, many people say it's one of the most knowledgeable Discords ever, and one of the most civil Discords ever. I'm very proud at how not polite, but how civil we've kept it there. So please join us on Patreon if you can. That's the best way to show support. And then, I don't know, Dan, any final words?
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter, everybody. And I will have Gerard edit this in the beginning so you know why I said this. I said holy moly because Dan caught Jesse messing with a mole in the yard, and I never made it clear why I said holy moly at the beginning. It is because Jesse messed with a mole, and she didn't hurt it. At least not
The
critically.
mole of successfully burrowed back underground after I told her to get away from it. So
we watched it crawl
I
away.
think the mole's
She
fine.
wasn't biting it.
I think
she
the
was
mole's
just
fine.
kind of poking it slowly with her paw, like, what is it?
Oh, and she was doing this. She didn't bite it at all, but she was like with her nose, like like that a little bit,
Like what she does with our cat. Like,
yeah.
so almost trying to play with it. So we don't think Jessie is a mole killer. I would not trust her around a rabbit, though. She looks like she wants to get rabbits, and squirrels. But yes, that is why I said holy moly. And Dan said Easter. The point I was going to make is those are the two things that were news for us today. And it is over an hour later that I am correcting this. But we will try to make Gerard edit in the video in the beginning as well. Like, this is why Tom said holy moly. We will say later.
Okay.
But thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Have a good week, everybody.
Goodbye.
This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, it's not just me. Moore's Law is Dead is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, renders being done by the industrial designer Jean-Philippe Clermont, and special assistance is also provided by Carmen Cry and Carrie Nosugad as well. Find all of our information at www.mooreslawsdead.com on the About/Support page. In the event you do want to hire me for consulting work, hire Gerard for audio work, hire Jean-Philippe for industrial design work, or you're interested in working with Carbon Cry or Carrie Nosugada as well. You can also find our long-term sponsors on that page if you want to show them some love for putting food on our tables. Or you can also mail us some love. You can send letters or hardware donations to the following address: Moore's Law is Dead, P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. Although, to be honest, the best way to show Moore's Law is Dead some love is to support us on Patreon. Patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content truly possible. Every month, and really every day, depending on who you're talking about, me, Gerard, Dan, and Jean-Philippe are working tirelessly to provide a steady stream of content that we could not keep doing unless we knew the work was possible without being reliant on sponsors dictating every little thing we put out. Don't get us wrong. We love our sponsors, but we love directly working for you, our fans, much more. If you have any extra money, even a couple free dollars a month, consider supporting us directly on Patreon. Those couple of monthly dollars will get you access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to ask guests questions, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who I am sure would love to meet you. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to early, ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the ability to ask questions in all Broken Silicon episodes and Loose Ends live streams ahead of the recording, and the entire back catalog of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, in addition to having thanks in the credits of videos and podcasts depending on the tier, with other perks available as well. And hey, if you cannot afford to support us directly every month, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family, and on social media and websites like Reddit. And give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast app of choice. All of this does really help us so much. But like I said, this podcast would not be possible without the patrons directly providing predictable and reliable support every month. And so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher supported levels: Brad Medlin, Drita Full, Zjis, Daniel D, Deke, Nicholas Buckner, Aaron Close, Jan Rauner, Daniel Hyde, MJB1, GZ Ziggy, Toka, SNES Chalmers, Jerem Ferrier, Velcom Alev, Jensen Wayne, Gregory Sacker, Sarcastro, Chris Trisk, Evan Dingle, Compressed AI Blocks, Hal Booma, Shredbird, Sammy Malas, Jordan Simkovic, The Boss Haas, Chrysantine, Jonathan, Neithra Zing, Jake Dude 23, Jake Martin, Zlicky, Meat and Pork, Tim Robb, Ian Clifford, Travis Gooding, Aimers Unite, Mad, Zoot Taylor, Greg, Michael McGee, Patty Cake, Stephen Coates, Amiable Chief, Mark Mitchell, Tommy, Aisha, James Anderson, Mark Raidmaker, Cole Addict, Cameron, Henry Zhang, Wesley Sager, Michelle Pell, Hexapuma, Winwing, Reginald Ari, Teak Autumn, Windstar, Corey Leonard, James I, Raider, Little Germany, Shay, Milton, Melodic Warrior, Brett Jones, Chuck Glidden, Mac Daffy, Stephen Dick, Justin Bustle, Austin Haggerty, Joe Foot, Brian Scanlon, Hardland, Jensen Angima, Joseph Kelly, Slushball, Himsa Gung, Tails 2299, Brian Wright, Sisyphos 7771, The Forbidden Juice, Jeffrey Gentleman, RB Racer, Alex Vega, Dr. J Mad, Free D, Michael Cozy, John Swin, Thalo 215, Crystal Joe, Elberg Gum Keekum, Solarized 80, Sprutnik, Brian P, Hoodat42, Cornster 671, Penta Winta, Hal Richard, Omega Doge, Mr. Tiger, John Wick Boomstick, Hugo Ander Key V, Penguins, Love AI, Porcelain Oats, State Farm State, Curry King 3, Nixus Mania, Sakosha 37x73, Rye Hill, Cheap Bowls, Sheriff Fluffy, Kevin Koontz, Smash Axley, Armand Vacatura, Kalan Reichel, Jonathan Harris, Karim El Masri, and of course Angel of Cake, and of course, thank you to Zahara for the music.